Listen, it starts with just one, and then a couple more, but it's okay, these are favorites, so you're going to reread them. But what about the ones you haven't read? The series you've only just started? Then there's a sale, and before you know it, you're down the romantasy rabbit hole because look at that cover, and you're buying books you have no intentions of reading. No, not that one. Hey guys, it's Kesara, and today we're gonna be doing my winter book haul. As you can probably guess from that intro, I went on a teensy bit of a shopping spree after Christmas because there were some sales that went through and I got a bunch of books, but I'm happy with most of the purchases I got. There were a couple of mistakes in there here and there, but it was okay. And these are gonna be all of the books that I bought from November through January. I will be including February with my spring book haul. So the first book I actually ended up getting in kind of like winter was The Serpent and the Wolf by Rebecca Robinson. This is actually an arc that I got from the publisher, and I'm so glad they reached out to me because I don't know how they knew that this book was like written for me. Like they knew. I'm so glad that I ended up picking up this book because it is a romantasy story, but it's set in a high fantasy world, and I do think the fantasy world is quite built out and there's a lot of like political intrigue, but like the romance is definitely kind of like the point of the plot, and it's an enemies to lovers like arranged marriage romance, which are kind of some of the romance tropes that I enjoy quite a lot. So I really enjoyed that, but then the main character also has a lot of emotional backstory that I found incredibly interesting, as well as a struggle with like magical abilities and powers. I love seeing those types of elements brought into these stories, and I really ended up enjoying this. It also kind of kicked off my love for reading physical books again, and I'm so happy to have gotten this book. And then we have The Will of the Many by James Islington. This was my favorite read of last year. It's the book that gave me a reading hangover, so I literally could not read anything after this, but I enjoyed it so much. This is a fantasy that is Roman inspired, and it has kind of like a hierarchy to how the magic system works. This is the first book in the hierarchy series, and the next book in the series, The Strength of the Few, is coming out this year, I think in the month of September, so I'm definitely excited to get to that one, and I will definitely be rereading The Will of the Many before I get to that one. So I needed to have the physical book because the first time I borrowed it from the library, so I needed to have my own copy. Then we have The Book of Doors by Gareth Brown. So this is a new favorite of mine. I listened to the audiobook from Libby and I ended up loving it so much. This has a lot of tropes that I specifically look for in fantasy, and I think it was done quite well. This is the type of book that I've just always been wanting to read, so I'm really excited to have it as well so that I can reread it in the future. I love being able to talk about it and on my channel too, so I'm really excited to have this one. Then we have The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. So this is another of my favorites from last year that I picked up kind of on a whim. Like I didn't expect to like this as much as I did, but I did end up really loving this. It's very much a mystery set in a fantasy world, and I'm currently reading the second book in the series. So I absolutely loved the first book and I needed to get a copy of it because I knew that if I ended up loving the second book just as much, this could be a new favorite series of mine. But even if I didn't, the first book I enjoyed so much that I knew I would want to reread eventually. And then the first book that I've actually read after I bought it is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. I did post like a short review of this, but I did talk about it more in my reading blog as well. And this is a post-apocalyptic kind of like self-discovery journey that our main character has. It's super short, only like 164 pages or so, but it's incredibly interesting. While it's open-ended towards the end, I still found myself thinking about this book for days afterwards. Like it's definitely one of those books that makes you think, and I enjoy that about it quite a bit. So I'm really happy to have gotten this one as well. And then we have a new release that I'm currently reading, and that is Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. So this is the third book in like the Fourth Wing trilogy, obviously, and I'm so excited for this. I recently dropped my reviews for both Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, so look out for those. And I will say, like, this is not like one of my favorite series of all time. Like, I get that it's not like the best series ever, especially like from a fantasy perspective, but it is so much fun to read, and like from a romantasy perspective, it's actually fairly good, and it doesn't shy away from a lot of things that I think typical fantasy books tend to actually shy away from. Like there's actual like dragon battles and things like that in this series. I enjoyed quite a bit, so I really enjoy these way more than I ever expected to, so I'm really excited to continue on with Onyx Storm, and I'm actually currently reading it, so I'm right about there. So not super far into it, but I'm enjoying it quite a bit, and definitely happy to have this beautiful deluxe edition also because it is gorgeous. And then we have all of my book of the month books that I got. I kind of got a lot of books from book of the month in January and December, so I'm probably gonna skip my February box because I got so many already, but let's go through these. I honestly don't remember which one I got which month, so we're just gonna go in a random order. First we have The Wedding People by Alison Espak, which I did actually already read and I enjoyed quite a bit. This is a contemporary slash literary fiction about a woman who goes to this hotel to kill herself, but at the hotel there's a wedding and she has this interaction with the bride because the bride does not want her to unalive herself in the middle of the wedding, and it just goes from there. And I enjoyed this quite a bit. I had definitely planned to get the book before I read it, but then I ended up reading it before it ended up showing up at my door, so I'm a little disappointed by that, but I'm still happy to have it. I believe this is my January box that's on top, so we'll do the January books first, then we'll get to the December ones. So the next one is Piranesi by Susanna Clark. So this is actually a book that I bought because of BookTube. Like, I wasn't planning to pick up this book. I remember when it first was on Book of the Month, and I remember thinking like, Susanna Clark is like a beloved author, but I had started reading Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which I think is her other book, and it's good, don't get me wrong, but it's just super long, so I never ended up finishing it. I did think this was probably a better place to start with her, but I've heard so many people talking about this book and loving this book so much that I was just like, I have to understand this. Like I don't know what it's gonna be about, but I feel like from what people say, it should be something that makes you think. And of course, Susanna Clark is a fantasy author, so like, I love fantasy, obviously, so if people are talking about a fantasy book, most likely I'm gonna pick it up, so I'm excited to get to this one. Then we have Babylonia by Costanza Casati. I've heard a lot of people talking about this author recently and saying how much they like her. I think it's because her novels were on Book of the Month that people were talking about her, but this was actually my January book, so I don't know anything about this book whatsoever. It's like a new release, but it seems like something that I might end up liking. It sounds like it's about Babylon, so I don't know, like, is it historical fiction, is it fantasy? I'm not sure. I hope it's fantasy. It doesn't say. I feel like normally, like, on the back it'll say like fantasy when you get a Book of the Month book, but I can't tell. That being said though, if the world building is done well, then I don't actually care if it's historical fiction or fantasy. Like, for example, Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett is a historical fiction book that I love so much because of the world building, despite the fact that there are zero fantasy elements to it. So even if this is historical fiction, I hope it reads kind of like that. I don't think I'm gonna get to this anytime soon just because I have a lot of things that I want to get to, but I am excited to get to this eventually. Then we have The 13th Child by Aaron A. Craig. This was my December book for the book box that you have to pick one from like the 5, and I didn't have any others that I was interested in, and I believe this one is fantasy. So if there's a fantasy one on there and there are other books that I want to get that month, usually I'll end up picking the fantasy book, so that's this one. We'll see how I feel about it. I haven't read anything by Aaron A. Craig before, but she is a beloved author, so I feel like it could potentially be good. Then we have Blood Guard by Cece Robson, and let's just be honest, this is a cover by. It is gorgeous. It's sprayed edges, so like, I don't have very many of those, but every once in a while I'll see one that I really like, especially when they have like designs on it and just not like plain sprayed edges. I always end up liking those, so I really liked that because of this book, kind of the reason I got it, but it does seem like something that I would end up liking, so we'll see. I will get to this eventually. I do have the audiobook on hold at my library as well, so that I could switch between the two, so when I get it, that's when I'm gonna attempt to pick this one up, and hopefully I'll end up loving it. Then for some more favorite books, we have A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. This is the first book that I ever picked up by T. Kingfisher, and I actually read the book before I picked it up from Book of the Month, but since it had a Book of the Month version of it, I decided to pick it up because look how gorgeous that is. It is so pretty. I love it, and I like having like the hardcover version of it, so I'm so excited to have this. This is a dark fantasy, almost fairy tale like book that is following two characters. Cordelia, who is the daughter of a sorceress and is kind of being controlled by the sorceress because her mother makes her be obedient, and then we have Hester, who is the sister of the man that the sorceress is trying to seduce, and I found this to be quite dark but also really gripping at the same time. Then I also did get Part of Your World and Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. So this is the first and third book in this series, I guess. I already had Yours Truly because it was the book of the year last year and you get one free book for the year, and that ended up being Yours Truly, but I ended up picking these up after I had gotten that one, and I ended up loving these so much. These are contemporary romance novels, obviously, but I feel like they're really well done and they draw me into the story, but they have more than just the romance going for them, so I end up loving them so much. They're definitely the types of romance that I do see myself rereading in the future when I just need something light and easy to read, even though these are not that light or that easy to read, but it still like has that same sort of feeling to it, so I ended up really loving these. And then we have the sequels for the Temeraire trilogy, which is Hidden Warrior and the Oracle's Queen. I ended up getting Hidden Warrior used, as you can tell from this side, but it's in pretty good condition, but I couldn't find it new anywhere except for the paperback version, but I already had the mass market paperback for the Bone Dolls Twin and the Oracle's Queen, so I had to get this one used, but it's okay, I'll be fine. And this series is one that I just finished the Bone Doll Twin like literally a few weeks ago, and I definitely want to continue on with the series. It's following a character named Tobin, who is a girl, but she's being hidden magically as a boy because she is the rightful queen of the kingdom, but her uncle would kill her if she existed. So instead, she's been hidden as a boy who is not in line for the throne, or technically would be like third in line for the throne after her cousin. And I'm enjoying it so far. The ending of the last one was exactly what I wanted it to be, so I'm excited to continue on with the series, and I can't wait to see how this is going. I really do like this author so far, and from what I've heard, her other series is actually her more popular one, so I'm definitely excited to get to that one as well. The next book I got was Assassins of Reality by Marina and Sergei Dyachenko. This is actually a book that was translated from Russian because the authors are actually from Ukraine, and this is the sequel to Vida Nostra, which is a dark academia like fantasy novel, and it's kind of like the weirdest kind of absurd but still like not, but it's incredibly unique dark academia novel, and I loved it so much, so I'm really excited to read the sequel. I do think I'll end up rereading Vida Nostra first because the last time I read it was like 5 years ago or something like that, so I am excited to get to this, but I'll have to read the first one first. But like at the time that I read Vida Nostra, it was like one of my favorite books. I'm really excited to get back to this world. And then we have The Risen City by Isabel Steger. I just started the first book in this series, which is The Paths of Lantistine, and I'm enjoying it quite a bit so far. So when I saw this one on sale, I was just like, I have to get it. I already have the first 2 books in the series, and I have a feeling I could potentially binge read this series. It's not super fast paced, so maybe it's not quite binge reading, but I could see myself picking them up one after the other, which is how I want to read my series anyway. So that's why I had to get this one, especially since it was on sale. So I'm really excited for this. This series seems to be a very politically focused high fantasy series, but it's following a whole cast of characters, and I'm really enjoying it so far. Then I also did pick up Godkiller and Sunbringer by Hannah Kaner. So I had picked up Godkiller earlier, was it this year or at the end of last year, and ended up loving it way more than I was expecting to. I was not expecting to like this that much. Like I was expecting to enjoy it. I was expecting to just have a good time, and I ended up getting super wrapped up in the characters and their trials and tribulations and all of that. And it's actually a pretty decent fantasy novel set in a pretty well-built world, and especially considering how short this is, I was not expecting that. So I enjoyed this a lot more than I was expecting to. But one thing I did not like about it was that I was reading the audiobook. I personally did not love the audiobook, and I would have preferred to read the physical book, so I decided to get the physical book because it was on sale. And while I was at it, I decided to get Sunbringer since it's the next book in the series. I had put the ebook on hold at my library, but decided to just get the physical book since it was on sale also, and I'm excited to get to this one eventually. This was not on my winter TBR, but honestly, I feel like it should have been because I do feel like I want to get to it sooner rather than later. Then we have Locklands by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is the 3rd book in the Foundry Side series. This is another one that I got on sale. I had bought the first 2 like right when they had come out, and I enjoyed the first one a lot. I was slightly disappointed by the second one, but I still ended up liking it. But by the time the 3rd one came out, I knew I had to reread them to get what I actually wanted from the 3rd book, and I didn't feel like rereading them. So I still have not read the 3rd book, and I really want to read it. One of my goals this year is to finish series that I've started, and this is one of the series that I could finish pretty easily by just reading the 3rd book in the series. So I'm excited to have this and excited to get to this hopefully sometime this year. I've also been reading his other series that starts with The Tainted Cup, and because I've liked that one so much, it kind of has motivated me to get back to this other series because I liked this one quite a bit also. I actually think I like the world in this one maybe even more than the world of The Tainted Cup. So I don't know, I'm enjoying this. So I definitely want to get back to this one sooner rather than later. I did also pick up a few books by T. Kingfisher because you know she's the author that I'm just like eating up her books right now. So I picked up The House with Good Bones and Thornhedge. I'm a little bit more interested in Thornhedge than The House with Good Bones because I think this was more of her horror while this one is more fantasy, and I've been loving her fantasy so much. Her horror is a little hit or miss for me, but her fantasy I've been loving so much, and I've heard this is like one of her more popular ones, so I'm excited to get to it. But either way, I will be getting to both of these eventually. And then we have Speaking Bones by Ken Liu. This one is the 4th book in the Dandelion Dynasty, and recently, I don't know why, I've been getting so much more like people talking about the Dandelion Dynasty. I think it's because after I picked this series as my series to continue on in winter. Like, I've maybe been Googling it more or something, but I've been seeing it on my feed so much more, and people seem to absolutely love this series. So I'm super excited to get into it. I already had the first 2 books in the series, and I had the ebook for the 3rd book. So I needed to get the 4th book somehow, and I saw it on sale. So I was like, you know what? Let me just go ahead and get it. It is the hardcover though, and the rest of the books in the series I have on paperback/ebook. So I have different versions of all of the books, but it's okay. Like, this was cheaper than the paperback. So I was like, it's fine. I'll just get the hardcover. I'll love reading it in any form I get it anyway. Then we have Witness for the Dead by Catherine Addison. So I actually have the first book in the series, The Goblin Emperor, on my shelf already. And it's one that I've been meaning to pick up for a while. And recently I've heard more people talk about it. I hadn't heard anyone talk about it like when I first picked it up, but I've heard people talk about it now and they seem to love it. So I do think I'll pick it up sooner rather than later. And if I do pick it up, I think I'll want to pick up the next books in the series as well. So that's why I decided to pick up Witness for the Dead. It was on sale. I didn't realize it was this short. It's a lot shorter than I kind of expected because The Goblin Emperor is quite long. So this seems more like a companion novel than like an actual sequel, but you know what? I'm okay with that. Companion novels are great too, and I am excited to get to this series. And this one is kind of told as like almost like a cozy like fantasy, but like set in a high fantasy world, and it's apparently about goblins. That's what I'm assuming, at least. And then a book that is by an author that I haven't read yet, but I really want to, is The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. I've heard so much about this series and his other series, and he just seems like a type of author that I would absolutely love and writes the types of books that I would absolutely love, but I haven't read any of his books yet. So I'm really excited to get to this. This was on my January TBR to get to, but it's like super low priority for me just because I haven't, like, I'm not like in the middle of the series for this one or anything like that like I am with some of the others. I will be getting to this eventually, and hopefully sooner rather than later. But either way, I'm just super excited to have the physical book, and it's like a floppy paperback, so it's a good version of it as well. Oh, and in this series, if you couldn't tell, this thing right there that looks like a dragon is actually a god, and it's so huge compared to the human. Look how small the human is. I'm like, I don't even know what this series is about other than what people have said about the covers, and it just makes me more and more excited to read it. Along those same lines, I also got a few other books by Lynn Fleeling. I've got The White Road, The Shards of Time, and Trader's Moon. These are books in her other series. I forgot what the series name is. Night Runner series. And I've heard this series is actually better than the series that I'm currently reading. And I did think one of these was the first book. I thought this was the first book. It turns out this is the 3rd book. So I am still gonna have to get the first book, but these were on sale. So I was like, since they're on sale and this is an author that I want to read more of, and I'm definitely gonna be picking up this series eventually, I might as well just go ahead and get it. Hopefully I can get to it sometime this year. And the next book is Fever Dream by George R.R. Martin. So George R.R. Martin has written one of my favorite series of all time. So of course I want to read more books by him, and I was kind of skeptical of reading his books in the past just because I knew he didn't write a whole lot of like fantasy. He'd like written in like different genres and stuff, and like I'm not really interested in like his Wildcard series, but I did pick up Night Flyer, and it's super short. It's like, it's either a short story or a novella. I honestly don't remember which, but I enjoyed it so much. It's sci-fi, but it's like sci-fi horror in a cool, interesting mix, and I really like that. So I decided to pick up Fever Dream because this one is a vampire novel. I think it would be interesting at some point to do like a vampire series where I read vampire books by authors that I love. So for example, George R.R. Martin has one, Octavia E. Butler also has one, and I'm sure I could find more by other authors. So that's kind of why I decided to pick up this book. But I also do just want to read more books by authors that I really like, even if it branches outside of my comfort zone. And I feel like this might, because I think this probably is more horror than it is fantasy, but I think that's okay. And I'm excited to get to this one. And then we have Upon a Broken Throne and The Blind King's Wrath by Ashok K. Banker. So this is the 1st and 3rd book in the Burnt Empire series, which is a series that has been on my radar for a while, but my library does not have it, which is why I haven't gotten to it. But since I saw them on sale, I was like, you know what? I should just go ahead and pick them up because it is a series I want to read eventually, but since it's not right in front of me, I never like have access to it to actually read it. So it's the type of series that could end up being one that I end up loving. So because of that, I decided to just go ahead and get it, and I will get to this at some point this year, and I'm really excited for it. I don't know that much about the series, but I think this is like a Gods Walk the Earth type of series, which seems very like in my mood right now with the types of books that I've been reading. So I feel like this could be another one in that kind of vein that I'll end up loving. Next, I got a bunch of books in the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett, including The Color of Magic, The Light Fantastic, Interesting Time, Unseen Alchemicals, The Last Continent, and Eric. Alrighty, so Discworld is a series that I've decided that I'm gonna read whether I like it or not, just because the concepts are so interesting. And I feel like a lot of times with like my favorite series of all time, like when I first start reading them, I don't like it, but then I get through the series and end up loving it by the end. And then when I go back and reread the earlier books in the series, I was like, yeah, these books are amazing. I don't know what I was thinking the first time around. That happens to me more often than you would expect. And I feel like Discworld is one of those series. Like I have tried them in the past, like a few times. I don't love it because I always get annoyed by the humor, but it's not that I don't like humor in books. I do love humor in books. I absolutely love humor in books, but I think I have to get into the story first and then I can laugh along with the story. So like I just haven't gotten into these yet, but once I get into them, then I'm gonna laugh along with it and love them. But I'm just not there yet with these, but I do think I will get there eventually. So I want to slowly get all of the books in the series, and I love the new covers. Like I have the old ones too, not all of them, just for like The Color of Magic and The Light Fantastic. And you look at those two compared to the old ones, those two are way better. So obviously I had to get the new covers because they're gorgeous. And while this one is not part of my series challenge for this year, this is the series that I do plan in 2026 to finish, but there are 42 books in this series. So I do think I'm gonna have to get to at least some of them this year in order to be able to finish it by the end of next year. So I've got a few that I can pick up throughout the year. And then we have Reaper's Gale by Stephen Erickson. So I'm currently reading the Malazan Book of the Fallen series. I only have like the first 5 books in it. So every time I see a copy of one of the next books in the series on sale, I decide to pick it up. But this one is kind of a mistake because I didn't quite mean to pick up this size because I have the mass market paperbacks of the other ones. But it's okay. I actually think I'll enjoy reading this size more than the mass market paperback. And I'm just excited to get to this series. This is like one of the most challenging but rewarding high fantasy series out there, and I cannot wait to get further into it. And another book I kind of made a mistake on is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, except this it's not The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This is The Restaurant at the End of the Universe, because I accidentally bought the sequel to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This was on sale and I was like, oh, it's like a cool version of it. It's like a pink, interesting version of it. But no, apparently The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is only the first book in a series, and this is the second book. So I do have to go back and get The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's one that I have been meaning to read for a while, but I will eventually get to The Restaurant at the End of the World, and I'll be happy to have the book when I get to it. This was like literally only like $2 or something, so I don't regret getting it or anything. I'm glad to have it, but I do need to get the first book in the series first. And last we have When the Moon Hatched by Sarah K. Parker. And yes, this one is a bit of a cover buy. Actually, I've had this one on my radar for a while because of the cover, because it's been shown on my library like app on Libby for the longest while, and I've been putting it on hold, and it's like 10 weeks out. Like I'm not gonna get it because of how many people have it on hold. So I was like, when I saw it on sale, it's a beautiful cover, I might as well get it, but I literally know nothing about this book, and all I've heard about it is that it's a romantasy book and that it's not that good. Like it's kind of a derivative romantasy book. That's what I've heard other people saying about it. Mind you, I don't follow a lot of romantasy like book talkers or booktubers. I tend to be more on booktube, people who read a lot of fantasy, not romantasy. So when they do pick up romantasy, generally they don't have the best opinions of them, and I don't blame them. I kind of feel that way too. So I don't know how I'm gonna feel about this. Maybe I'll end up loving it, maybe I won't, but we'll see. I do think I'll read it eventually, and I don't tend to love romantasy on audio, and I don't generally read ebooks, so I feel like physical books are probably the best way for me to read this anyway. So that is all I have for you. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up to support my channel. If you've read any of these books, let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you. I post at least one video per week, but I've been posting a ton of bonus videos, so consider subscribing. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.